today, and welcome to the next episode on arts, culture, and heritage development and research of the backgrounds and how we got to where we are in Collingwood. You think it's the people? Is it the water? Is it the winter? Is it the ski hills? What is the thing that brings people here?
Let me tell you what I think it was. I remember reading a paper and then seeing him in person here, David Foote, the demographer.
Ah, yes.
Mm-hmm. And it really resonated with me when he talked about the Collingwood region as being a NORC, an N-O-R-C. Do you know what that is, Peter?
I was at that Dr. Foote presentation.
Yeah,
Yes.
but he had actually written about it years before. That was his last visit, but there was an earlier visit, and he talked about NORCs. So a NORC is a naturally occurring retirement community, and how he explained that, and that's why, to me, that was such a revelation for me to think about this, is that here you had like the three of us coming up here as skiers in our 20s. We then come up only for day trips. And then we get older and we have a family and we come up for a weekend. We may stay at a hotel. Then we rent a place, and we're now in our 40s. And we rent a place for the winter for 3 or 4 months only. Then they start to think about, the community starts to think about building broader resources recreationally, like golf courses. And biking begins to emerge. And what ultimately happens is that, unlike all the other retirement communities that you can think of in Canada and elsewhere, said David Foote, is that people who came in their 20s began renters, bought a weekend place, and then when there was a question where they wanted to live the rest of their life, there wasn't any question in their mind. They wanted to be in Collingwood. So all of a sudden we became a naturally occurring retirement community versus, say,
a promoted one.
Yeah, well, Niagara on the Lake. That's the one I use as an example when I'm asked about this. Niagara on the Lake, none of us went to Stratford when we were 20 or 30 or 40. That was not part of our early life. So when we finally decided to semi-retire at 50 or 60, friends of mine, started thinking about Niagara on the Lake. But it wasn't a naturally occurring retirement community as the Collingwood region is. So the magic of this area, in my opinion, is the fact that it evolved, that tourists became weekenders, became renters, became permanent citizens, all in one smooth evolutionary move that now has where now we are no longer a winter destination. We've got just over 50% of the visitors are here for summer activities versus winter. We're a year-round community. I like to joke with people that we haven't built a cottage here in 20 years because a cottage is a seasonal dwelling. Yeah. Well, we don't build cottages.
No,
they're all homes.
Yeah.
And if you've got a cottage, you've already turned it into a home. So we don't build cottages. And so everything has changed dramatically. And because of the immigration from the city and a high arts and culture awareness among city people who are so involved in all of the arts and culture of the big city, so many of the people up here, a good example is the Collingwood Cinema Club. The Collingwood Cinema Club shows the best films in the world. They come from all of the film festivals. I would say probably 80% of the 1,700 members of the Collingwood Cinema Club are immigrants from Toronto who used to go to TIFF, who would go to the Mount Pleasant Theatre because that's where the good films were.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And down to Bloor Street, and right? So we've created our own arts and culture up here from city folk moving up here, And that blended with already the Blue Mountain Foundation of the Arts, which has been going for over 40 years. All of a sudden, it all sort of naturally came together over this last 10 or 15 years. And that's what we've been writing about in On the Bay. And I've really enjoyed becoming sort of an advocate for how we've grown naturally into a community.
I think another very valuable aspect of the Collingwood site is that it's an hour and a half.
Yes.
Well, it used to be an hour and a half.
Yeah.
It used to be an hour
Well,
and
it's
a
an
half.
hour to get out of Toronto.
Right.
So then it's an hour and a half.
It is, truly. Sorry, guys. It's time to go to break. We'll be right back. When I first moved to Collingwood in '82, it was an hour and a half I could be downtown Toronto, and that was a very positive
Right.
reinforcement for me because I was from Toronto. I could see my friends, I could go to a hockey game, I could do all the things culturally that weren't available in the north area. But it was that, so even at an hour and a half, 2 hours, it seems to be when economic researchers do positioning, they do circles from the major urban centers.
Absolutely.
And there's a distance that people won't travel, or they will travel, but it's dramatically reduced. So I think the location was a great activity for us. Now, a lot of energies came from our people that moved in, and as you spoke about people in that natural transition, I probably know, I was just thinking, I know almost 30 or 40 people, that's exactly what they did. They started up here, they moved up a little bit older, they got a little bigger place, they got a bigger place, and then when it came to retirement, there was absolutely no discussion.
There was no question.
Yeah. For me, it took a little longer to understand how valuable Collingwood was. I was immersed in the operations, so I didn't see the trees sometimes for the forest, or the vice versa. It was a job opportunity to go back to Oshawa, and I was right in the final throes of here's the job, here's the position, here's the salary, and I actually sat in the chair and said, I can't do it. And it was because I knew my daughters loved living in Collingwood, I knew my wife lived in Collingwood, loved it, I loved living in Collingwood, so it was that recognition of what a wonderful place Collingwood is then, and is today, and is getting even better. Do either one of you have any concerns about the future? Is the future are we going to get too big? Are we going to lose anything in this expansion of our size? Because we are growing dramatically. And not just Collingwood, the region's growing dramatically.
You really got to think region,
Yes.
and not. We tried so hard at On the Bay magazine to not be Collingwood centric in terms of our editorial offerings.
I noticed that.
Thornbury, Creemore, even and Meaford. This is all part of Southern Georgian Bay. But Peter, there is another demographic that people are only now awakening to, that's going to build out the population base even more than our generation has. And that's every one of those 40 people that you know who transitioned that way, half of them have kids.
Yes.
That are now in their 30s.
Yes.
And who don't want to climb the corporate ladder in Toronto, don't want to live the life of a Torontonian, and are weekending, and then all of a sudden you don't have to be at the office any longer.
No.
So there's a whole new thing. So people, the definition of a weekend has changed. It's no longer just Friday and Saturday. You have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Mondayers. You have midweekers and then to go back to go to theater on the weekend. It's all changing, and this new demographic who want to live in downtown Collingwood and have their kids walk to school. That's a whole new demographic. That wasn't us, because we didn't move into downtown Collingwood, at least most of the skiers didn't.
Right.
We had our place outside at Cranberry or a chalet or a farm up in the hills. And so this is a whole different migration that's happening right now. And you say, well, where's the work up here? Because we no longer have the industry. The work is that this has become the entrepreneurial capital of the country. And the reason is because of those kids in their 30s and 40s. They have to start a business.
Dr. Foote did profess this.
Yeah.
He said that quality of life will be the rationale for people to locate in different places. So, and it was hard for me to believe that people would turn down double income jobs for a better quality of life. But truly, he was right. People want better lifestyles.
They do, but remember too that some of those people are having their cake and eating it too.
They are,
because they've got a big salary in Toronto, and they've got enough freedom that they can be up here a lot of the week. And I know some of them, including my son, who spends as much time up here as he can, and he runs a big ad agency in Toronto. So, and what does he want to do long term? He wants to be here. So we actually created a term for that demographic, and we wrote about it in the magazine about 10 years ago. And they're called NATs, N-A-T-S. Mm-hmm. Now there would be no way you'd guess unless you remember that story, and that was 10 years ago. A NAT is a naturally attracted 30-something. So a naturally attracted 30-somethings are people that they're not retiring, but they're attracted by that lifestyle. So we put that up. I've written to David Foote and given him that term that he can feel free to use where else it exists. But he says, it doesn't exist that many places.
David Foote truly was brilliant. He foresaw that women's hockey, which was almost non-existent when he wrote his document, was going to be the savior of arenas in Ontario, because the women's hockey was going to grow exponentially and the male-dominated sport was going to reduce dramatically. And today is exactly that situation has occurred.
He made one mistake though, and if you were at that conference out on the highway, it was that he predicted that bird watching would become huge.
Yes, he did.
Do you remember that?
Yes, he did. But in defense of David, from a North American position, bird watching is one of the top 5 things people do, which I can't believe. The number one thing in recreation master plans over the last 5 years, which I've been engaged in developing, is single lane bikes. It's no longer the lawn bowling, the arenas, the pools, it's outdoor exercise, somewhat independent of group functions, but safe. So a lot of people don't want to ride on roads, they want to ride on a single lane on the side or the boulevard. Guys, we've got to stop at this point right here, and we're going to be right back after a moment. So one of the last issues I'd like to discuss with you two, now this has provided all of us with a spectacular ability to do 5 things at once. So with our phones, we can see dates and projections, and we can buy stock, and we can do almost anything off these things. Do you see any challenges or dangers in the future about the focus, because our arts, culture, and heritage is about people getting together in social aspects. And I sometimes worry about the phone diminishing the desire of younger folks wanting to get together, because they can almost do everything from their phone. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's the story of you're sitting there and you look over in the restaurant and there's a table full of kids all on their phones and they're talking to each other on the phone. I mean, it really breaks down the interpersonal relationship.
Yes, and from a educator point of view, I see that all the time. It's almost like I'm putting a capital punishment forward by saying, take all your phones and put them on your desk and turn them off. You can almost hear the gasping going through the room. It's because they're so used to that. So I'm just a little bit concerned that the predominance of this screen and the screen time from 204 has gone like this, exponentially up. Screen time from TV, laptop, and has gone dramatically up. At the same time, the social problems of emotional aspects of that same group has also driven upwards the same way.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if there's things in our lifetime that we've seen grow and be positive. Is there a worry that the cell phone might interact in a negative way with arts, culture, and heritage? Will people want to watch the phone instead of going to the live performance at the station to see jazz? Will they do their research here versus reading your magazine? Well, what impact is there, or we don't have a handle on it?
I think there's a huge impact, and I think that we have to differentiate direct communication, texting, emailing, from social media, and I think that they're very different. And I think that where the problem lies is in the preoccupation of social media. The amount of time that that the gazillions of people who are on Facebook, who are literally using Facebook all day to try and track their friends or to track what's going on, to Twitter madness and to other ways that social media uses up time, because that's not direct communication with people.
I agree.
That's an intermediary. Whereas at least I'm probably in better touch with my kids who live in London, England, Bangkok, LA, and Toronto by email, by FaceTime. FaceTime's a great positive thing because it allows people who can't be together to actually see, almost, sense each other much better. But the social media, where they're using another device to interact like Facebook, to me, that is a real worry, and I can only hope that, as we've heard some people say, I'm off Facebook, I'm out of that, either for security reasons or because I don't want to live my life that way. I'm hoping that it'll be a fad. What will replace it, we don't know. But I think on the other side, on texting, for instance, was big in Europe 10, 15 years ago. It only came here in the last 10 years, where people, and only more recently, where people are texting. I think that kind of quick, direct communication with people that you're going to be seeing by the end of the day is fine. My problem is social media per se.
I have a box of telephones that I've kept from my career, and it's a big box, and they go way back to the 80s, when those big, almost army-looking handsets with the big antennas that weighed about 15 pounds apiece, and you had to have a special
and the battery pack that was
Oh,
so
I had all those, and I take them and put them on the table to these new millennials, and I said, okay, let's guess the years of all this stuff. And they're just befounded to look at this stuff and go, I saw that on TV once. You know, the big ones?
Yeah.
And the different little teeny phones, they went into a small phone aspect with a flip, and then they've gotten bigger again. So you can see the evolution of this communication device, and it's huge.
Yes.
Guys, it's been really great and interesting. I thank you so much for the information you've helped us with, and I'm sure we left a lot of crumbs that people can take by research aspect and go and find out about Frank's background, or what Frank talked about this, or Jeffrey's positions and things. The final question for you, Jeff, and I don't mean it to be a difficult one, but we haven't talked about your combination of taking editing and business together to do your current position. So it's an
Oh.
interesting relationship. I mean,
You mean the new general manager of the radio station?
it's very interesting. I mean, I became aware of that because I always listened to that station.
Right.
Because as I grew older, I would have different stations for different things I did in my life. So there was a country and western station when I was going to be doing something of one side, and then
Right.
there was the classical music side that I discovered, and I said, now I always listen to classical music on the discs and on the records, but I never listened to it as much as I do currently, and it's not a promotion for you. I'm just saying it's an interesting combination that you're an editor, but you also now are doing something, managing a radio station.
Well,
so the crossovers.
So one small point, I'm not an editor, I'm a publisher. Now it's important
Yes, it is
to
a
understand that difference. So a publisher has the responsibility for both the business as well as the spirit of the magazine. If you were doing a theatrical production, it would be the producer. So in a brand new show, the producer hires the director. He's kind of the business and the spirit of the venture, and so that's what I'm doing with the radio station. I'm playing the role of a producer. I am thinking through how could this radio station be better. Well, we've got 16 years of great content in On the Bay. What if we took all the historical inside back cover looking backs and asked Janet to rewrite them for radio? You write very differently for radio, and it has to be obviously much shorter. And so we've repurposed editorial excerpts from the magazine onto radio and then sold them to sponsors who would sponsor looking back, sponsor history notes.
Great move.
And we've done that with maybe 5 or 6 things in the magazine, including Grassroots Heroes and other aspects where it's genuine editorial repurposed for radio and sold not as advertisements, but of sponsored editorial spots on the radio.
Part of the quality of life.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just it's actually quite a natural combination. We're both local media. We now broadcast. One little bragging point. We're the first local radio station to broadcast to all of Ontario.
Yes.
So we're right from Kingston to Hamilton. Bill Anderson on his 10 to 3 show is talking to everybody in Ontario.
Well, there's people around the world he's talking to because with the
Yes.
event of the computer,
Yeah, that's true.
He was talking to somebody from Havana and somebody from Australia, and it's just interesting to hear. Oh, I'm calling in from.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very. I'm listening to you, and I'm in Vienna. Wow. Thank you, Frank, very much for sharing your stuff with me today, and thank you for all the work you've done in this community to date. It's been a big step forward. And Jeff, same thing. You guys have brought in things to improve, and that's what it's all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.